person who has actually really started the anti-nuclear movement and has kept it in the forefront for at least 30 years, if not longer. And thank you, Dr. Caldicott, for joining us. I really appreciate your time.
That's a pleasure.
Well, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, and I'm kind of on this hot button here because the United States just passed the NDAA. They're going to start the Space Force. But I am dumbfounded about the nuclear science. You've been working to do this for a long time. You wrote a book called Sleepwalking to Armageddon. And it's a compilation of some brilliant, papers written by a bunch of different people outlining like why we need to stop this insanity. So my question to you is, why do you think we're not getting any traction?
Because your politicians are bought and sold to the military-industrial complex. Almost all of them are corporate prostitutes. And also that the military corporations, Boeing and Lockheed Martin, I could go and name all United Technologies, etc., have put their factories to make these hideous weapons of death in every congressional district. And so if anyone tries to stop the money being allocated to weapons, everyone screams jobs. It's a really sick system. And I've just written an article about this, which, if I may, I might actually read to you, which outlines everything I think about it. Would you be interested in that?
I would love that.
I write this piece as a physician, expertly trained to make accurate diagnoses to either cure the patient or to alleviate their symptoms. I therefore approach the viability of life on Earth from a similar and honest perspective. Hence, for some, this may be an extremely provocative article, but as the planet is in the intensive care unit, we have no time to waste, and the startling truth must be accepted. As T.S. Eliot wrote so long ago, this is the way the world ends, not with a bang but a whimper. Will we gradually burn and shrivel the wondrous creation of evolution by emitting the ancient carbon stored over billions of years to drive our cars and to power our industries? Or will we end it suddenly with our monstrous weapons within which we have captured the energy powering the sun? Here's the stark diagnosis from a US perspective. The Department of Defense has nothing to do with defense because it is, in effect, the Department of War. Over $1 trillion of US taxpayers' money is stolen annually to create and build the most hideous weapons of death and destruction, even to launch killing machines from space. And since 9/11, $6 trillion have been allocated to the slaughter of over 500,000 people, almost all of whom were civilians, men, women and children. Brilliant people, mostly men, are employed by the massive military-industrial corporations Lockheed Martin, Boeing, BAE, United Technologies, to name a few, deploying their brain power to devise better and more hideous ways of killing. From an unbiased perspective, the only true terrorists today are Russia and the United States of America, both of which have several thousand hydrogen bombs, larger by orders of magnitude than the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs, on hair-trigger alert, ready to be launched with a press of a button in the US by the US President. This so-called nuclear exchange would take little over 1 hour to complete. As in Japan, people would be seared to bundles of smoking char as their internal organs boiled away, and over time the global environment would be plunged into another ice age called nuclear winter, annihilating almost all living organisms, including ourselves. But the stark truth is that the United States of America has no enemies. Russia, once a sworn communist power, is now a major capitalist country, and the so-called war on terror is just an excuse to keep this massive killing enterprise alive and well. Donald Trump is right when he says we need to make friends with the Russians because it's the Russian bombs that could and might annihilate America. Indeed, we need to foster friendship with all nations throughout the planet and reinvest the billions and trillions of dollars spent on war, killing and death to saving the ecosphere by powering the world with renewable energy, including solar, wind and geothermal, and planting trillions of trees. Such a move would also free up billions of dollars to be reallocated to life, such as free medical care for all US citizens, free education for all, to house the homeless, to hospitalize the mentally sick, to register all citizens to vote, and to invest in the abolition of nuclear weapons. The United States urgently needs to rise to its full moral and spiritual height and lead the world to sanity and survival. I know this is possible because in the 1980s, millions of wonderful people rose up nationally and internationally to end the nuclear arms race and to end the Cold War. This then is a sound template upon which we must act.
Wow. That's a definitive statement. That is exactly perfect. You're right. It is exactly what we must act on. It's exactly...
Yeah, and America's got no enemies. I mean, that's the the strange concept and truth. It's got no enemies. And all it does is invade other countries. It's got 800 military bases in 80 countries. How dare it? How dare it? And the United States has interfered in almost every single election since the Second World War, and then they talk about Russia. Russia really didn't interfere in your election. It's ridiculous. They just need to keep Russia as an ongoing enemy, and she's not an enemy.
Right.
What America's done is enlarge NATO right up to the border of Russia, even though America promised Gorbachev that that would not happen. They've put missiles all along Russia's border. They're extremely provocative, and this could easily lead to the annihilation of life on the planet.
It's almost as if that the United States military goads other nations to start the nuclear war. You know what I mean? Like that's what they're doing. And the enemy du jour is Russia these days. 10 years ago it was somebody else.
It's always been Russia. And Russia hasn't invaded any country since the Second World War. They talk about the Ukraine. The Ukraine was a Russian sort of affiliate. Yeah, that's right, in the NATO pact. And Yanukovych, who was then president, said to Putin, what will we do? And Putin said, let's think about it for a while. Then joining the WHO, the Ukrainians would have lost their free medical care and free education, everything that goes along with a socialist state. And so Yanukovych was thinking about it, as was Putin. But in the meantime, Victoria Nuland, a right-wing, horrible woman, and her husband, Kagan, they orchestrated a coup in Maidan Square. And she was giving out cookies and stuff to people, and there were snipers shooting people, and Yanukovych fled. And they got a horrible man called Poroshenko as president of the Ukraine, who used to be a Nazi and had lots of Nazi sympathizers. Now, people on the east of the Ukraine, Donbass, etc., they didn't want this to happen, and so they fought the people in Kiev, etc., and that created great divisions and lots and lots and lots of deaths. And America supplied the Ukrainian president, Poroshenko, with weapons. Meanwhile, Crimea was also freed from Russia, but they had a referendum in the Crimea, and 96% of people said they wanted to stay with Russia because they are Russians virtually, and Russia has a big naval port there. So Russia didn't take over each of those places, and yet the New York Times, etc., they keep saying that it did and putting out these myths and lies and untruths, drumming. And even when you watch the impeachment proceedings, even when I watched Nancy Pelosi just now make her speech pre-impeachment, she implied that Russia was an enemy.
That is the feeling in the United States, and in fact, it's on every single nation.
Well, It's an enemy in that it's got 12 hydrogen bombs targeted on New York City, and bomb and nuclear weapons on every town and city in America greater than 50,000 people. So from that perspective, it is. But so is America. And the whole nuclear war, as I said, exchange would take 1 hour to complete, and that's it.
That's stunning.
And it could happen tonight.
That's the weird part about the whole thing, about the odd reporting about Russia in the United States, to be honest, is they act as if the Russians are still the Soviet Union, that they're still demanding, they don't even recognize, the way it's framed on American media, frankly, is like it's a mock democracy. And frankly, it's interesting because the United States doesn't mock any other democracies on the planet that I have heard of. But in the United States, you hear this often, that it's a mock, it's a Putin-style democracy, and it's not really a real democracy.
Together, I mean, he's not he's not the best of all men. He does kill some journalists, and
he does get rid of. But you know what? So does the look at.
But if you listen to his speeches, and he'll give a speech for 2 hours, they're quite magnificent, and he's talking about the risk of nuclear war and what we've got to do together and make friends with each other. And that's why I would support Trump, because he would like to do that, and everyone's stopping him because they want to keep making weapons and have this illusion that Russia's an enemy. I mean, the whole thing is sick.
The whole thing is sick. I mean, like, the mainstream media has nobody talking about the threat of nuclear weapons or the threat of nuclear contamination.
I sent that article to the New York Times. I thought it was a good article, although somewhat provocative. They refused to.
Did they really?
To print it? Yeah.
Wow.
So I got it published in a little online paper here.
I have the hardest time, though. It's almost as if young people's eyes glaze over. They just don't want to hear it. They don't want to believe it's real.
Yeah, but that's because they're ignorant, Lonnie. They don't know what's going on. As Jefferson said, an informed democracy will behave in a responsible fashion. And in the 80s, we informed the democracy. Every single person in America knew about the risk of nuclear war and what it would mean.
This is a serious, critical issue, and we don't have a lot of time. That's the thing. Like,
it could happen tonight.
That's right. And if they could do something in a subversive way.
Who's they?
The military. If
Oh no. It'll be a full-scale nuclear war, and that's it.
You think that it's going to just be full-scale? They're just going to go straight out?
Well, there's nothing else that's planned. I mean, North Korea could blow up New York, and that would be a good example to the rest of the world of what we're talking about. But that won't happen. Everything's planned to go all at once.
Dr. Caldicott, what would happen? You would know this answer. What would happen if, say, a city was bombed with a nuclear bomb where there was a nuclear power facility, like New York has Indian Point there, which is its own catastrophe?
Yeah, they'd all melt down. They'd all melt down. You couldn't have the Second World War in Europe now because it's so covered with nuclear reactors.
Right, that's my thinking.
And also in the Ukraine there are still 15 nuclear reactors, including Chernobyl.
I know. I mean, that is really, and that's one of the things people don't realize is that's in fact, I think, why the United States military wants them. They consider that to be their, frankly, they consider all of us to be assets on a balance sheet. We literally, none of us have any value to them except what can make them money.
I think we've talked enough. I've read the article. It's everything, I think. And I'm going to hang up now, and I'm going to get on and send. I want the article to go, I'd like it to go viral, but I'll send it to those other places that you suggested and see what happens, huh?
Oh, that would be awesome. Well, I really appreciate your time, Dr. Caldicott. Thank you for speaking with us, and I'm going to, ask you to come back in a little while again so we can maybe keep this ball rolling.
What, after the nuclear war?
Well, hopefully right before it. Maybe we'll be instrumental in stopping it. How about that?
That'd be very good, Lonnie. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. Talk to you later. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.